Alright, now we're going to demonstrate the half Nelson hammerlock turn. So we're going to start with the half Nelson. Now from here, after you get the half Nelson, you're going to grab the 4 fingers of your opponent's far hand and you're going to pull his arm down to his hip. You can put his arm on top of his back. That's called the hammerlock. Now wrestler A is going to tee down, which means he's not going to be totally perpendicular. He's going to be out to the side but not perpendicular as in the letter T, and he's going to drive at what we call far angle up, which is he's driving halfway between his opponent's head and shoulder. So he drives straight ahead, puts elbow to elbow, and then he puts his own elbow on the mat. Now he's going to drive his fist in towards his opponent's belly button. Now the hammerlock hand moves from the wrist to the elbow. Right now wrestler A has his half Nelson elbow on the mat and his hammerlock elbow is in the air, and he's going to reverse that so that the hammerlock elbow goes to the mat and the half Nelson elbow goes to the air. Now he's going to drive his opponent over his hammerlock arm so that his forearm is on his opponent's back. From here he's going to lock both of his hands together. He's going to squeeze his elbows together, lifting his opponent's head. He's going to put his chin up in the air. Now he's going to work for the pin. Put his opponent's shoulders on the mat, and it's 16 points and a victory by fall. Alright, once again, the half Nelson hammerlock turn. Starting with the half Nelson, wrestler A is going to grab wrestler B's 4 fingers and pull his wrist down to his side. He's also going to put his opponent's wrist on his back. Wrestler A is in T down position. He's going to drive at far angle up and put his elbow underneath his opponent's elbow and then sink his elbow to the mat and then punch his fist in towards his opponent's belly button. The hammerlock arm goes from the wrist to the elbow. Now he's going to put his hammerlock elbow on the mat and lift his half Nelson elbow in the air. This picks his opponent's head up. Now he's going to drive his opponent over his hammerlock arm. He's going to squeeze his elbows together, lifting his opponent's head in the air, lock his hands together, and put his chin in the air and work for the pin. Alright, the half Nelson hammerlock once again. Starting with the half Nelson, wrestler A grabs his opponent's 4 fingers, pulls his wrist down to the side, puts his arm on his opponent's back. Now he's going to drive at far angle up, and his elbow is going to go underneath his opponent's elbow. Then he's going to put his own elbow behind his opponent's head, elbow on the mat, punching his fist in towards the elbow, towards his opponent's belly button. His hammerlock hand is going to move from the wrist to the elbow, and now he's going to put his hammerlock elbow on the mat and lift his half Nelson elbow up into the air. This lifts his opponent's head up in the air. He's going to drive his opponent over his hammerlock forearm, lock both of his hands together, squeeze his elbows together, lifting his opponent's head up in the air and arching his back and putting his chin in the air and working for the pin. The hammerlock half Nelson turn.